this part we saw yesterday. So Scott and I mostly concentrate on the left-hand side where you see the KNIME Analytics platform. So how you create a particular solution. The KNIME server is then also part of a separate slot later presented by Jim. And I really like to focus on three different parts: performance, then Python and scripting, because we spent more time on improving this one, and also file handling again, because we added some more capabilities in there too. Let's start with performance. So what we are going to release as part of the 4.3 release is an extension part of KNIME Labs that allows us to deal with data more efficiently and more wisely. So it's essentially the engine underneath KNIME that everyone uses, but that not many people are aware about. So it's an improved data representation and access to the table. There are many different tricks that we apply there, but more on that later. Just to show you an example, so what we've prepared here is a KNIME workflow consisting of nodes that are frequently used in all sorts of different workflows. So nodes like row filtering, sorting, joining. What else do I see here? Type conversion, mass formula, etc. Running this in the old table backend or the standard table backend, to be fully aware of this workflow runs in about 2 minutes. If I now go and change the backend, which is a trick that I'm going to show in a second, this workflow and all the workflows where we use it, they tend to execute much faster. In this case, it's about 40 seconds. In order to do this, what you need to do is obviously install a new extension, which will be available in the current nightly and also then later in 4.3. It's called KNIME Columnar Table Backend. It's part of KNIME. Part of KNIME Labs. Then in KNIME, you have to change the configuration on individual workflows. So you have to set it on a workflow level to choose and use the new columnar table backend. Once you do this and then you run it, you will use this new data engine and your workflows will run quicker. Now the question is, how does it work? And there is a lot of technicalities that I really wish I could talk about, but they don't let me. But just to give you a hint, so there are different layers in KNIME, how the data is represented and when the data is put out onto disk and when is it kept in memory and how are certain simple types and primitives and character strings are kept in memory. There are also different caching layers involved and there's kind of a life cycle. Those are all details that I'm not going to talk about here, but instead I'd like to point you to a workshop that is going to take place tomorrow called the Columnar Table Backend. Mark is going to present that, or alternatively, if you booked already another workshop, you can also go on to our blog post. And very recently, we published a blog post with all the details on this new backend. One of the reasons why we did it, and that's the second topic, is to enhance our scripting integration, most notably the Python integration. So the Python integration as it looks right now is a set of nodes that allow you to seamlessly integrate a Python script into your KNIME workflow. So what you see here down at the bottom is a KNIME workflow. You see there's a Python scripting node, a Python visualization nodes, and these nodes feel like very regular KNIME nodes because they are very regular KNIME nodes. And there are different types of nodes that you can use: scripting, visualization, model building, and prediction. Now, Python and KNIME are two different technologies, and the data is exchanged between these two systems by some data exchange. And our plan is to use this new table backend that I commented on before, also to speed up this table or this data transfer. All of these Python nodes, they rely on this concept that you point to a particular executable on your hard disk, on some installation of Python, or you point it to a Conda environment. And then once you use it, this is going to be run, this will run your Python script. This works perfectly easy if you run this all local, but it presents sometimes a problem once you put this workflow onto a KNIME server or you share it with someone else, because the requirement, and this is very typical for Python, they need to have the same the same version of Python, the same packages, the same everything. So that's a very typical problem, challenge, or let's say a support case that our support people have to deal with often, that there's a different environment in environment A and B, local and on the server. So what we are going to add also in 4.3 is a node that's currently called Conda environment propagation. The purpose of this node is that during configuration, and this is what the configuration looks like, it's going to detect what your environment, your local environment, where you currently configure this node, looks like. It does some smart guessing. It has some heuristics built in. What of these packages that it detects on your file system are really explicitly mentioned and required, and which of these packages are implicitly part of the installation. If you find that there's a certain package that really needs to be in there, you can choose to include it or unselect it, depending on your needs. Once that is configured, this configuration is saved with the workflow, and this can then also be shipped with the workflow. So it's essentially baked into the workflow. If it's then uploaded, for instance, onto the KNIME server, and this is run on the server, this node will ensure that the environment is present or provision it if it's missing. So you can guarantee that all the nodes will run the exact same environment. Very similarly, if you download a KNIME workflow from the server or say from the KNIME hub, run it locally, and there's a certain package missing, then this package gets installed. Few other changes and comments on Python. We are also planning to release a NimePy package, which isn't really part of the KNIME software stack. So NimePy is a package that you find on Python. So via pip install, it allows you to call out from a Python script to a workflow. So what you see here at the bottom is a Jupyter notebook. So in here, you can use your local data, send out the data to, in this case, a KNIME server, let the KNIME workflow run, and then you retrieve the result in here. So that's also going to be updated. The other piece, and Scott mentioned that already, is a notion of dynamic ports. So in the upcoming release, we plan to have a new node, a Python scripting node, that's going to replace many of the existing Python scripting nodes where you currently find one input, one output, whereby an input and an output is represented by a pandas data frame. So all of these nodes kind of get legacy or deprecated in a future release, and you can use this Python scripting node and this click on these three buttons to add additional inputs and outputs, but otherwise they are equivalent to the existing Python scripting nodes. Fair. Okay. Last not least, more on file handling, and Scott mentioned some of this, but there were new additions that I also would like to talk about. And just to quickly recap why we did this, and this is an effort and a project that has been going on for the past year, and it's still not done, even though it's mostly done, and we are going to release it from KNIME Labs. So the reasons why we did all of this and spent so much time on improving our existing framework for reading and dealing with files is that we like to have a consistent user experience across all the nodes that allow you to read files or do something with files and to easily access different file systems. It should be easy to migrate between different file systems, and Scott showed that already briefly. And we'd like to have the capability to add more file systems as we go. And last not least, we also looked at improving some of those nodes to perform quicker, also in conjunction with the existing table framework. Okay, so some comments here on the different file systems. So, and Scott mentioned that already in the in his previous session. So all of these reader nodes will now have the ability to connect to different what we call file systems. The most simplistic file system is your local file system, but can also be something that lives relative to your workflow, or can be a connected file system. So a remote resource, a cloud storage, a KNIME server, an SSH server, etc., some big data file system. All of these nodes now also have these dynamic inputs. So what you see here on the right, the Excel reader up here, it doesn't have the input, but you can easily add it. And once it's there, you can connect to a file system that, for instance, requires authentication. And once you have it, you have the full flexibility. All these readers can be used on your local file system. You can also do file handling with all your local file systems, with your local files. You can do things on a remote system in the same cloud environment. For instance, the SharePoint connector we mentioned already. So you can move files from SharePoint into a particular place on Azure Blob Storage. You can move files between different cloud environments, for instance, here from Google into Amazon S3, or you can also connect to on-premise systems, SSH, HTTP, FTP, a KNIME server, etc. This one we've seen already, and we have added this capability to more nodes. So once you have your reader, in this case a CSV reader, which now also has this input port, you can just read it from place A, in this case Azure. You just connect it to a different system, and it's going to run equally the same, just reading from this different system. So it's very, very easy. The last point I wanted to raise here is the performance. And what you see here on the slides are really 4 different workflows, and I put them together so that I can easily run them all in parallel. These nodes here on the left, or pointed to with the nodes in 4.2, they currently are not yet deprecated, but they will be in 4.3, are the old version, and then you have the new version next to them. If I run them, okay, it's not quite as quick, unfortunately. There's something wrong with my GIF here. Okay, this is really it was a recorded live experiment, and you see that these nodes run much faster, and that is because of this new table backend, but also because these nodes have undergone a major rewrite, and we looked specifically at performance and making them run much, much faster. The last, and that's really the hottest topic of all, is that these reader nodes will now also come with an additional tab that allows you to do further manipulation on the table. So for instance, you can read multiple files. It's one thing. You can then also specify and change the schema of the file. So you can exclude certain columns. You can rename columns. You can shuffle and shift the columns to a different type. You can also do some type mapping and, for instance, do some parsing, all in the reader node, which will save you some of these pre-processing nodes that usually follow downstream. And then obviously you also have the preview in the node itself. There will also be a dedicated table manipulator node in the upcoming release that also allows you to do this, which is going to replace many of the existing manipulation nodes. At this point, we are planning, when we move out the nodes, CSV reader, model reader, there are like a dozen of different nodes. We move them out of labs and they will have this capability. There are still some nodes that we need to change and add this capability of inputs, bulk reading, etc. And this is about what I wanted to share.
So let me, Bernd, be the disembodied voice for a second. This is fun. I heard a rumor that maybe there are some changes coming to the UI, and since you may know about those, maybe you can share them with everybody.
Yeah,
maybe?
You know, Scott, the problem is that I am still a developer, and developer are kind of reserved. They don't want to talk about new stuff until it's really, really available.
It's just KNIME Summit. It's just us. Like, come on, you can share it. You can share it.
Claim it's all Tilman's fault because he also made me prepare something more in here. And here
very good.
Thank you, Tilman. We have a KNIME Analytics platform. It's a nightly build that I just downloaded 15 minutes, 2 hours ago. And in here we have a KNIME workflow. So this is just a regular KNIME workflow. There is an extension that is already part of the nightly build and can be installed. Everyone can get it. And this is going to add this little button up here. If I go and click this button, it's going to put me into a different perspective. This is going to be a new editor that allows us to edit KNIME workflows. You see there's a bit of a different UI. There are also some different concepts in here. For instance, how I go into meta nodes and into components, how I run workflows. So there is still stuff kind of discussed. This new UI will give us the opportunity to question and review some of the existing user concepts. And the most important part is this isn't a standard Eclipse application anymore, but this is a browser. So that's a browser-based editor. And this is something that we are also going to use in other technologies, for instance, in the hub. And I think this is what Scott and
very good
wanted to see.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm glad that you had something to show us because I think people are going to be really excited to see what's coming.